Good evening, TMA301 students from all campuses. My name is Gerry Jacobs. I'm the lecturer on the Waterfall campus, and the purpose of this slideshow is to orientate you a bit better and in more detail in respect of the assignment that must be submitted towards the end of the month of April. The very first thing is that it can be attempted individually or in pairs or in small groups. The lecturers on the various campuses, that's the TMA301 lecturers, would have stipulated which of these options apply to you on the campus where you are based. For example, the students on the Waterfall campus, they are allowed to submit their assignments either individually or in pairs, but not more than two in a group. The assignment must be conducted only in MS Word, and it needs to be uploaded, the final product, by the 30th of April at the latest. Of course, it can be submitted earlier on. The facility has already been made available on the ECI page of this module. The maximum uploading capacity is 20 megabytes per document, and one would prefer, I would normally prefer, and all the lecturers would prefer, that you upload just one complete document that contains all the parts, as well as a declaration form. But we have made provision on the ECI facility where you are doing the upload to upload maximum 4 documents per pair or per student or per group. I'm going to have a look at the 3 parts of the assignment individually, and the first part is the part where you have to interrogate existing examination paper, and it's worth 20 marks. You will be presented, and you have been presented, with a section of a grade 5 mathematics exam paper, and you need to evaluate this paper against the requirements for effectiveness and efficiency. You have to identify technical or editorial issues, language-related issues, content-based issues, and also perhaps a lack of consistency in the writing of and the design of the exam paper. All of these deficiencies, and you must identify at least 20 of them. You're welcome to identify more if you can find them. You need to label all these deficiencies individually, and you need to put the label in the exact location where you've spotted the deficiency or where you think the deficiency exists, and you need to highlight each of these labels, and it's also advisable to highlight it by making use of a color, for example yellow across the letter A in this case. You have to provide us with a separate list of all the labels, a separate page at the end, so that we know what the reasons are, why you regard each of these specific deficiencies as a deficiency. What are the reasons, and what did you find that perhaps that goes against the grain of setting effective and efficient exam papers? Here's an example of the practice paper that was included in your assessment guide, just to show you how the various deficiencies should be identified and labeled. There's, for example, a deficiency in respect of question number 1.1, and it has been labeled A, highlighted in yellow, and the deficiency is the sentence reads, the question reads, how many weeks are there in 4 days? And that's completely wrong. It should have been, how many days are there in 4 weeks? So that's the first deficiency on this page. There's the second one, number B. This specific question, number 1.4, contains 4 possible answers, but the answers or the options in C and D are exactly the same, or more or less the same in D and in B. Not in C and D, but in B and D are exactly the same. They should differ from each other. And thirdly, the very last question is number 1.6, and the numbers of the various options. There are 4 options, and they have been labeled A, B, C, and D as all the others, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, etc. But capitals have been used in the case of the options and in 1.6 instead of just the normal kind of letter type of letters, like we have done in 1.1 up to 1.5. What about part 2 of the assignment? You have to draft a memorandum for this grade 5 math papers that you've been provided with that forms part of the assignment. You have to present the memorandum in a table format in MS Word, and you have to use the equation editor function of MS Word where necessary. I would say it's not necessary in respect of question numbers perhaps, but it might be necessary in respect of specific operations, mathematical operations that you are conducting. The memo framework is, the suggested framework is captured on page 6 of the assignment, and there are more guidelines on this framework to be found in the Department of Education GET Math School-Based Assessment Exemplar booklet for grades 4 to 6 from page 59 onwards. This specific booklet looks like this, and it has been uploaded to the TMA301's ECI page, so you would be able to download it from that page. There's an example of the framework that has been suggested, the questions on the left. But first of all, the various columns that make way for questions, your expected answer, clarification if needed of the answers, how many marks would be awarded, and then how many marks in total per question. Then the questions have been numbered from 1.1 up to 1.10 in respect of question number 1. And then you also find 2.1 and 2.2 in respect of question number 2. There's a possible answer, an expected answer, and you see the tick marks. So this answer is worth 2 marks. The correct answer is worth 2 marks. And there's 1 mark that's awarded for the 256 and another mark for the 592. Here's the rest of the memorandum in respect of question number 2.3. And the clarification has been added that the correct answer is worth 3 marks, 1 mark for 4740. And this is a multiplication question, 948 times 45. So the first line, 4740, is worth 1 mark, and the next line another mark, and then the answer is worth another mark. And then it adds, or the examiner added, that any method, any correct method might be accepted. This is an example also towards the end of consistent accuracy marking, and that is in the case where someone makes a mistake, where you mark up to the mistake and then you subtract a mark or perhaps 2 marks, then you mark further. You don't have to make provision for consistent accuracy. It's not necessary in your memo, but we're using this as a learning opportunity to make you aware of consistent accuracy in respect of marking. The third part of the assignment is actually worth the most. It's worth 60 out of the 100 marks, and it will actually take a lot of time from you to get to it. Let's see what this third part of the assignment entails. You're expected to draft a new grade 5 mathematics exam paper, which is quite a hefty task. This has to be done in MS Word, and you have to use the Times New Roman font 14 to design your exam paper, with the exception, of course, of equation editor that you use. And equation editor normally presents items in Math Cumbria font 14, and you use it when you conduct math operations. In other words, when you sort of highlight some of the operations and some of the answers that you write down, especially some of the questions. In this case, there won't be answers. There are various design requirements that we have stated on page 7 of the assignment that you have to take a look at, and you have to go through them one by one. You don't need to allow for learners to also present their answers in your paper. In other words, you don't have to allow learners, you don't have to make provision for open spaces where learners can write their answers. They can do that on a separate piece of paper. What are the paper design requirements that have been stipulated by us? First of all, there needs to be a cover page that should contain all the required details of the institution that you want to represent. In other words, this exam paper is forthcoming from an institution that could be imaginary, and you have to create your own institution and name and logo, etc. All the questions and all the pages must be numbered. There should be questions only from 3 of the 5 content areas of the CAPS document, and the exam should be out of 80 marks, totaling 80 marks. The 3 areas, the questions should be forthcoming from the three content areas. The first one is numbers, operations, and relationships. That is worth between 45 and 55%, about 36 to 44 marks. The next content area is patterns, functions, and algebra, and about 30%, between 25 and 35% of the exam is forthcoming from this area, or should be forthcoming from this area, about 20 to 28 marks, more or less. And then the third content area is measurement, and between 12 and 16 marks, or perhaps a bit less, 15 to 20% of the exam should be forthcoming from this content area. Questions should be set on all four cognitive levels of the CAPS document. The first level is knowledge, maximum 25%, about 20 marks. The next level, a higher level, is routine procedures, 45%, perhaps between 40 and 50%, 32 to 40 marks. Complex procedures should represent approximately 20%, but it could be between 15 and 25% of the test, 12 to 20 marks. And then finally, problem-solving questions should make out approximately 7 to 13% of the questions in the exam. That's about 6 to 10 marks. The first level, knowledge, is described in the CAPS document, and you see the descriptions of the skills that are normally associated with knowledge in the second column over there. And a typical example of a question on this level, on the knowledge level in grade 5, is determine the factors of the number 64. The next higher level is routine procedures, and you can see that it's well-known procedures that are performed, and also simple applications and calculations, which might involve a number of steps. For example, calculate 488 times 16. When a learner shows the procedure and the steps, it's still a cognitive level 2, a routine procedure that he or she demonstrates. Third higher level is complex procedures. These procedures might involve higher order reasoning. It should involve higher order reasoning. And sometimes they're not easy to solve, and they do represent the real world context very well. There's an example in grade 5, on a grade 5 level, where John leaves the home at 6:20 and arrives at 7:35. How many minutes did he take to arrive at school? Does he take to arrive at school every day? Then the fourth and final level is problem solving, which is the most difficult, mostly unseen, non-routine problems. They are not necessarily difficult, but they do represent higher order understanding and higher order processes. And you might even be required to break down the problem into different parts. Here's a question about a train that arrives at the Malalaan station every 50 minutes. The first train stops at 7, and the question is how many trains have stopped at this station by about 11 p.m. at night. So you have to do a bit of calculation and even some breaking down into various steps. The exam paper should be followed by a breakdown of all your questions and sub-questions where you represent the cognitive levels at which they are pitched. Here's an example of a table that you might use. The question numbers and sub-question numbers are on the left. Then the 4 levels: knowledge, routine procedures, complex procedures, and problem solving. And in this case, there were 3 sub-questions that form part of question 1. The first sub-question was pitched at the knowledge level, the second one at the routine procedures level, and the third one at the complex procedures level. And this question is worth 7 marks, and there you see the breakdown in the table. The final requirements for the exam paper design is that it should contain at least one table that you have created. You've seen an example of a table in the previous slide. It should contain questions on fractions so that we can see equation editor in full action. And it should contain at least 2 diagrams that you have created. Especially the measurement content area makes provision for lots of diagrams that could be used. You can copy diagrams and pictures and other shapes from other material and the internet if you want to, but you have to study the rubrics and the mark sheets that you will find on pages 8 and 9 of the assignment very meticulously before you start your design and before you make your submission. Don't forget the completed and the signed declaration form that must be submitted together with your assignment. In the final instance, we are hoping that you will be submitting a tidy, a colorful, and innovative, and a neatly laid out exam paper. And the same could be said in respect of your whole assignment. I'm presenting you here with an example of a question that was contained in a grade 5 paper of the Tom Newby School. You can see a picture and you can see a diagram, it's quite colorful, and also the questions that relate to these pieces. I'm sure that if you spend a lot of time on this and you plan it carefully, you can come up with something similar and something even better.